Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next webinar series. So before we get started, if we can move to the next slide, Mark, just letting you know for our Russian colleagues, there is Russian interpretation available for this webinar. You can find the button at the bottom of your Zoom application. If you select Russian, you will be able to hear the presentation interpreted into Russian throughout the webinar. Thank you. Excellent. We can move to the next slide. So a very warm welcome and welcome back to everyone to the Road Safety Capacity Building Program, Webinar Series 1, which has been brought to you by the Asia Pacific Road Safety Observatory, APRSO, the Central Asia Regional Economic Cooperation, CAREC program, and the Asian Development Bank. And the grant funding that is supporting this series was received from the Japan Fund for Poverty Reduction, financed by the government of Japan through the Asian Development Bank. So once again, a very warm welcome to everyone that is joining us online today. My name is Jessica Trung. I am from a company called Lersinger, an organization that specializes in Vision Zero planning, and I will be the moderator of today's session. So that's just a little bit about me. It would be wonderful to find out a little bit about the participants that are joining us at this webinar today. So if I can please ask Mark, if you can please bring up the first poll question, it'll be lovely to find out, our participants that have joined the webinar today, which region of the world you are actually joining us from. So just a little bit about me. I'm actually from Australia. I'm currently living in the UK, but I'm actually joining this webinar from Japan today. So I would love to find out a little bit more about you if you can just kindly fill in that poll. So for those of you that have joined us over the last month, we've been holding this webinar series every 2 weeks for the last month now. And this webinar series has been designed to help us engage a range of stakeholders to help them build capacity and understand how to utilize the safe system approach to apply it to their road safety interventions and how data can help enhance policy investment and implementation practices in your respective countries. So if we move to the next slide, we've already had two webinars. So the first one, we actually focused a little bit on the WHO Global Status Report, and then the one that we had a couple of weeks ago was also talking about the different types of data sources that can be used to complement the WHO resources that you have available at your fingertip. In today's webinar series, we'll be talking a little bit about how do we utilize all those different data sources to actually compile it into a road safety strategy and a road safety action plan to help you meet your road safety targets. So joining me in today's session, I will be one of the presenters today, talking a little bit about strategy planning and action plan development, and then we're very lucky today to also be joined by Aravat Bokosyan from Armenia, who will give us a case study of how strategy development is undertaken in Armenia. So welcome, Aravat. If we move to the next slide, please, Mark, the one after that. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we start the presentations. Your microphone will be muted unless you are invited to speak. And there is a Q&A function that many of you have discovered already, I think, at the bottom of your Zoom application. So we do encourage you to be interactive in this session. Any questions you have, please pop it into the question and answer column, and hopefully we'll be able to get to that during the Q&A session at the end. Also, if there is anyone else in the audience that feels like they could answer the question, please feel free to add your thoughts to that as well. And then last of all, we will have a question and answer session at the end when we have completed all the presentations. So we do invite you to participate in that. If you've got questions, feel free to pop it in the chat, the Q&A box, and also you can also raise your hand at the end to ask a question. We do have Russian interpretations, so if you need to ask a question in Russian, that will be absolutely fine as well. So Just before we start our presentations then, it'll be great, Mark, if you can bring up the results of the poll that we just had, just to see where our participants are actually joining us from today. So hopefully everyone can see the results in front of them, in front of you. So it looks like most of our participants today are actually joining us from Southeast Asia, about 50%. And then we also have participants from Europe, Africa, and then a few from Central Asia, Middle East, and also from South America. So it sounds like we're well represented globally here. So once again, a very warm welcome. I hope you find this webinar today helpful and interesting. And please, once again, feel free to ask questions and interact on the Q&A session. So if we move to the next slide, please, Mark, thank you. So I am going to speak to you a little bit about effective strategy and action plan development today. My presentation is designed, I guess, to give you a bit of a flavor of how to utilize the data sources that you have in your country to help you put it into a cohesive plan so you can utilize that to help meet your road safety objectives. So in webinar 1, we've talked a bit about the data that's available in the WHO manual. And then in the second webinar, there was additional data sources that Soames also mentioned that we can utilize to complement that. So today's session is really about, well, how do we utilize that data to develop our strategy? So we can move to the next slide and the slide after that. I guess some people would ask, I guess the question is, do we need road safety strategies and action plans, and are they important? Well, there are actually a number of good reasons why countries need a road safety strategy to help guide their road safety work. And the very first one, I guess, is if a country does have a road safety strategy, it is signaling a commitment from the government that you are serious about reducing road trauma. The strategy is a product that is, informing the community. This is an important priority area for us, and we've got a plan on how to address it. And the second point is it actually also helps with stakeholder collaboration. There are many actors in road safety that are interested in helping out in this area, and a road safety strategy and an action plan actually helps unite stakeholders in achieving a common objective. So it helps sets out exactly the roles of the different stakeholders and how they can help contribute to reducing road trauma in your country. And then importantly, the strategy sets out what are the key road safety needs and priorities in your country. So it's identifying, is it pedestrians, is it drink driving, is it speeding, is it a lack of road safety barriers? It's identifying what are the key areas that needs work in your country if you are to reduce trauma. And it provides a framework for you to actually move forward and decide in the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, where are the action areas that you need to invest in. So if you don't actually have a strategy or an action plan in place, it's very difficult to understand what actions you need to take in the short and long term. And lastly, the reason why we need road safety strategies is that it helps elevate the importance of road safety. Without a plan, without actions attached to that, it's very easy for road safety to fall to the wayside, and it doesn't get as much attention as other public health issues. It helps with generating funding for the road safety priority areas that you've identified. And once again, it signals to the community that road safety is an important issue that we need to work on. And it would move to the next slide. And for those that consider road safety too expensive to invest in, the contrary is actually true. Not investing in road safety and road safety strategies would actually cost us more in the long term. So there's been some good studies that have indicated if we were to only spend 10% of what the current road crash cost us in a country today, we can in the long term prevent 70% of those costs in the future. So, in road safety, we don't like to just talk about, investments in terms of money only, But if you're looking at it from an economic perspective, it is actually very cost effective to invest in road safety because you're actually preventing a lot more costs further down the road. So there's actually really good reasons and sound points in terms of why we should be making sure every country has a road safety strategy and associated action plan that is helping guide them in their road safety, road safety journey in the lead up to 2030 and beyond. So if we move to the next slide, I'm going to ask Mark, can you please put up the next poll question? So I want to understand then, because we're talking so much about road safety strategies, just an understanding from the audience, how many people that's on the call today, does your country actually have a road safety strategy or action plan in place? If you can just answer that poll question, we'll show the results a little bit later in the presentation. And we can move to the next slide, please, Mark. So when we talk about action plan and strategy development, there are many, many different aspects that we will need to consider. And while I won't be able to cover every single aspect of strategy development today, I do want to highlight some key areas that should definitely be considered in the strategy and action plan development process. So the key areas for consideration would include target setting, the design of the system, modeling and data analysis, the action plan and strategic response, and community consultation. So in this presentation, I will touch on each of these points in turn. So we can move to the next slide, please. So the first area that I want to touch on is target setting. If we move to the next slide, please. So, and the next, please. And so when we actually start designing a road safety strategy, one of the first questions politicians, stakeholders would ask is, well, what are we aiming for? What is the objective of this road safety strategy? What are we trying to achieve? So when we think about the kind of targets that we want to set for our country and our road safety strategy, we need to consider both long-term targets and short-term targets. And there's been lots of guidance from the OECD and other countries that we should be ambitious and actually think beyond just the immediate targets that we want to achieve, but also think long-term, where do we want to end up? And that's the target should be visionary, it should be tangible, and it should be credible. And that's what we need to consider when we talk about long-term targets. And then if we move to the next slide. But of course, long-term targets can be a little bit too far in the future to make it tangible for a lot of people. So in addition to our long-term targets, we also need to make sure we've got some interim targets. So once again, they need to be something that is both ambitious but also achievable. And they should be derived from data. It shouldn't just be based on, a politician or the government just thinking, well, 30% reduction sounds like a good number. It should be based on some sort of data analysis in terms of how many lives we can possibly save and what is actually achievable in addition to being ambitious. So if we move to the next slide. So I guess the question is, for your country and many countries around the world then, when we're talking about road safety targets, what should we be aiming for? I think we are all aware that the UN global goals are actually aiming for a 50% reduction in road fatalities and injuries by 2030. So this is the goal that has been set by the UN, and it's attached to the WHO Global Status Report and the Global Plan, and it is what most countries have signed up for. So it is an extremely ambitious target that we're all aiming for. However, some jurisdictions have been even more ambitious, and we can click on the next slide. Some jurisdictions are moving beyond just the immediate 2030 target, and they're actually aiming for absolute zero road trauma by a set date. And an example of that is jurisdictions actually setting zero by 2050 as an example. And we move to the next slide. And you can see here that there's been a number of countries that have set this zero target by 2050. So the European Union, the US, New South Wales in Australia, Victoria in Australia, Transport for London. So quite a number of jurisdictions are being extremely ambitious and are actually moving beyond just a reduction to actually trying to achieve zero by a set date. And if we move to the next slide, and there's a lot of good research and I guess key points on why we should be setting ambitious targets as well. It's allowing us to put the immediate targets that we want to achieve in context. It helps drive policy programs, innovations, and most of all, it helps mobilize action between stakeholders and cooperation between all the different parties that are involved in road safety. And it also helps us understand and make tangible the safe system approach. What we initially saw as, utopia, something that might not be feasible or achievable in the short term, with jurisdictions setting these ambitious goals, it's actually helping us to envisage a future where it is possible to achieve a 50% reduction and even ultimately zero at some point. So there's really good reasons why we should be ambitious with the targets that we set. And we move to the next slide. Having said that, what should we actually be aiming for? And I think the key point is it's fantastic to be ambitious, but we also have to be realistic depending on where we sit. So we move to the next slide. So this graph is from the ERTAD report that is looking at how countries are currently tracking towards achieving a 50% reduction by 2030. So if countries want to achieve 50% reduction by 2030, you will need an annual reduction in road fatalities of 6.7%. So if we sort of use the comparison year of 2017, 2019, it means that by 2023, countries should have at least achieved an almost 19% reduction in their road trauma already. But you can see from this graph, there's only about 7 countries that are on track to meet the 50% reduction by 2030. And actually, disappointingly, there's actually quite a few countries that have actually seen an increase in their road fatality rather than a decrease. So going back to our point around when you're setting a target, we have to be both realistic and ambitious. So a 50% reduction is a great goal to have, but if you are looking at the trends in your country and you're looking at the data and analyzing how many people are being killed and, how many percentage reduction you're seeing each year, if you're seeing a consistent upward trend, it probably isn't that realistic to set a hugely ambitious target, because if you have a hugely ambitious target and people are not able to meet that, it would actually deflate some of that ambition a little bit over time. So what we want is a mix of being realistic and ambitious at the same time. And the way to do that is actually to look at the data in your country. And it can just be a simple look at the number of road fatalities and injuries that you have each year, and then deciding on the appropriate long and short-term target. It's important to consider our current practices and what we're doing and comparing that to the best practice that is available and seeing where we can make those changes. So we move to the next slide. So once you've sort of decided on your target, you have to decide, well, is it a short-term target or a long-term target? So if you're setting your interim targets, we would suggest, nothing shorter than 5 years. I mean, as we all understand, road safety actions take time to implement, they take time to take effect, especially when we talk about things like vehicle safety and infrastructure. They take a much longer lead time before you start to see the benefits. So if you're setting your target too close to your starting point, you're unlikely to see the benefits that you would like to see. So the shortest time frame for an interim target would be at least 5 years. And in the medium term, maybe 10 years. And if we move to the next slide. So the benefits of actually having a target that's set 5 years into the future is that it creates that urgency to start work straight away. And especially if you consider the governments and how long they sit in office, it's usually between 3 and 5 year terms. So if you actually connect that target within the time frame to their electoral term, you're more likely to get political buy-in, because most governments would want to see some sort of success while they are still in office. And then, like, if we move to the next one, the benefits of actually having a longer target, a 10-year target. Sorry, Mark, I think we're on the wrong slide. The next one, please. And the one after that. So the benefit of actually having a longer 10-year target is that it allows time for actually having time for actions to actually take effect and actually show success. And this goes back to, once again, technologies and infrastructure changes, vehicle changes that maybe take a much longer time before you start to see the successes. So we need to allow more time for those things to take place. And then it also gives us more time to get political buy-in and also community buy-in. And it also allows us time to come up with more innovative measures if needed. So there are pros and cons between having both a shorter and longer time target as an interim target. And that's something that we need to consider. And that's something that you need to think about in your country, what would work best based on the data that you have. So if you move to the next slide, then what you will end up with then is something like that, like this. You'll have where the starting point is. This is an example that I've taken from Sweden, where these are the targets that they're aiming for by 2030. You can see that they've set out the number of fatalities, the number of seriously injured, and what that target is by 2030. So in order for you to do this for your country, at the very least, the data that you need for this is a count of the annual number of fatalities and the annual number of serious injuries, so that you have a starting point to be able to do a comparison in your set target years. And also, you may think that having an overall target of fatalities and serious injuries, that's a little bit broad. You can also break that down into cohorts. You may want to set a target that is very specific to young people, or drink driving, or speeding, or, single bicycle crashes. You can set a number of sub-targets as well to help you understand where your key priority areas are. And you can see that is exactly what Sweden has done here. They've also set a target for serious injuries for pedestrian falls or suicides in the road transport or single bicycle crashes. So there's no limit to what targets you should be setting, but at the very least, your road safety strategy should at least be tracking and setting a target for fatalities and serious injuries. So if we bring up the next slide then, so the next poll question that I'll like to ask of you is, if you do have a road safety strategy and if you do have a target in your country, then what is that target for your country? Is it just a percentage reduction in road fatalities? Does it also include serious injuries, or you currently have no target, or you currently have no strategy? If you could let me know in the poll, that would be much appreciated. And while you're filling in that poll, I might move to the next slide and ask Mark, can you please kindly bring up the results from the earlier poll question that I asked, which is, does your country currently have a road safety strategy or action plan in place? So we just wait for those results to come up. And the results are in front of us now. So about 73% of the participants on this call have a current strategy or action plan in place, and about just under a third don't currently have a strategy and action plan in place. Thank you very much for sharing that. And we move to the next slide. So these results are actually quite in line with what we're seeing overall globally. So here are some stats from the WHO Global Status Report, the latest version that they have, finding out from countries how many actually have a strategy in place. And actually, out of the 193 member states, 117 countries have a national road safety strategy, which means, once again, roughly about a third don't have a strategy in place. And of the countries that do have a strategy in place, only 16 have got full funding to actually roll out the actions that they have stated in their strategies, with another 65 getting some sort of partial funding to help with their road safety work. And for the countries that are receiving funding for their work, they're mainly financing that through the taxes, either from vehicle or alcohol or insurance purchases, or they're utilizing the fines from speed, drink driving, and red light camera offences and violations, and using that fine to actually finance their road safety work. So it sounds like what we're seeing in our poll is actually mirroring what we're seeing happening globally. So which means that we still have a little bit of work to do to ensure that all countries have a road safety plan and strategy in place. So if we move to the next session, then is we talked a little bit about the importance of actually setting a target so that we know what our stakeholders and our countries should be aiming for in terms of a reduction in road fatalities and serious injuries. But that should not be the only consideration when you are developing your strategy. We also need to consider, what does the road transport system that can achieve that percentage reduction actually look like? So if we move to the next slide, so what does a safe road transport system look like? What does a safe transport system that can achieve a 50% reduction by 2030 look like? Or what does a transport system that can achieve zero fatalities by 2050 look like? So it's great for us to have these ambitious targets, but we need to understand the system requirements that are required in order to deliver on that ambitious target that we have set. And we need to understand, does it look different for different road users, for different parts of the road network? Does it change depending on who we want to move and the types of transport that we want in the system? So if we move to the next slide. So one of the more recent developments in road safety strategy planning is actually thinking about road safety and the transport system from the future, and then moving backwards to understand where our action items should be. So this concept is known as backcasting. It's requiring us to think into the future. So we project out and say that we want to achieve a 50% reduction in road fatalities by 2030. We forecast into the future and say, well, what does that system need to look like? And then work backwards to understand, so what should my actions be in the next 5 years, 10 years, so that I can achieve that 50% reduction by 2030. And it doesn't matter what that target is that you set. The idea is you work from the future backwards to understand your priorities. So instead of focusing on just the problems that we have today, we're thinking from the future and where we want to be. We want a future where no one gets killed, no one gets seriously injured, children can walk to school safely. That is the vision that we start with, and then we backcast for each decade in the lead up to 2050, where we should be investing, what we should be investing in, and where our priority actions should take place. And if we move to the next slide, and of course, when we talk about this Vision Zero planning and strategy development, it's not based on, once again, a shopping list of what we think sounds good or what we think the community would like. It should very much be based on evidence and data and best practice. So we've all understand and heard about the safe system approach, Vision Zero. And one of the key principles under Vision Zero and the safe system approach is the human tolerance, and understanding that as humans, our body can only take so much external force before our bodies will break or we die. So the key element when we're designing a system is ensuring that there's appropriate management of the energy created so that nobody will become injured or killed. So on the left here, you'll see this very simplistic graph that many of you might have encountered, and it is showing the maximum impact speeds that our bodies can withstand in different crash configurations before injury and fatalities are likely to occur. So that was something that has been created quite a number of years ago, but research and data has actually come a long way since then. And if we move to the next slide, and we actually have much more detailed information about the different types of crash configurations and interactions, whether it's between cyclists and vehicles or vehicles and motorcyclists or a car into a tree. We have a lot more data and information around what are those maximum impact speeds that we can afford to allow on our roads in order to keep everyone safe. And the key idea is to utilize this research and utilize this data to help design that safe transport system. And the next slide is also another example of the kind of detailed information that we have at our fingertips now to be able to help us design a safe road system to keep everybody safe. And then if we move to the next slide, please. But of course, a transport system is designed to move people around. It's designed to move cars and freight. So it's not enough for us just to say, let's just reduce the speed to a very low level and everybody will be safe. Well, we can do that and people will be safe, but it means that the transport system isn't able to do what it's designed to do, which is to move people and vehicles around. So another data source that would be very helpful during your strategy and action plan process is understanding, does your country actually have a transport plan in place that sets out the future of where you want to be in 10, 20, 30 years' time? So this is an example from New Zealand, and they have this transport plan, and they understand where they want to prioritize pedestrians, where they want to prioritize the movement of vehicles, where there is a mix of pedestrian and vehicle usage. So they know exactly how they want their transport system to look in the future. So our challenge now then is to understand, how do we overlay the safety on top of that to make sure we can meet both the road safety and transport objectives of the country. So the next slide is really, I guess, in terms of the data and what you need to consider when you're actually designing your system, is firstly understanding what are the mobility needs of your city or your jurisdiction. Are you wanting more active walking, active cycling, or do you want to be more car focused or motorcycle centric, or do you want to have more more people being able to engage in active travel? So that would look different for every city and look different for every jurisdiction, and that's okay. But we need to understand, what does the jurisdiction want for their transport system? And then the next step for us after that is to overlay the safety on top of that. So it's really then, what kind of speeds and infrastructure and vehicle measures do we need in order to keep people safe? And that's where the human biomechanical tolerance levels and the data that we have there would be very helpful in helping you design that system. And on the right-hand side, you'll see what you end up with is a bit of a plan. You can see that's an example. So once you've got the transport needs, you overlay the safety on top, you have a bit of a blueprint or a strategy and action plan on what your country needs to build in order to have a system that is both safe and also meets your transport needs. And then if we move to the next slide, and of course, your action plan and your strategy needs to be analytically derived. So those of you that are familiar with the WHO Global Status Report, which we talked a bit about in the first webinar, there's a range of different countermeasures and solutions that countries consider implementing. But I guess what it doesn't do at the moment is prioritize what countries should be implementing, because there's over 100 different measures that's included in that report at the moment. So it's not just a matter of picking from a shopping list and saying this sounds good or this sounds good for my country. You need to localize and contextualize what the trauma issues are in your country and have an understanding. So the trauma issues that we see in Europe would be very different to the trauma issues that we see in Southeast Asia. I know there's a lot of colleagues from Southeast Asia here today. So in Europe, motorcycle safety, while they are overrepresented, they probably make up around 20% of the road transport system. Whereas in Southeast Asia, motorcycles can make up to 90% of overall vehicle fleets. So the transport needs and the transport issues are quite different, which means the resulting trauma issues would also be slightly different. So for you to undertake this process, you need to, at the very least, understand what those trauma issues are. Even better, if you understand where in the system these fatalities are happening. So what we need to consider when we're deciding on the types of actions and priority intervention areas that we want to put in our strategy and action plan is not just cost. Cost is, of course, a very important consideration, but going back to the safe system, we're wanting to be ethical in the sense that everyone should be protected. So when we're selecting our countermeasures, we also need to consider, is what we have in our plan equal? Is it fair? Are we covering everyone that's using our roads? So in terms of age, are we taking care of our young people, older people, elderly people? Are we covering all our different, males, females? Are all road users looked after? Are pedestrians getting the same amount of attention as car users? So there are a lot of things that we need to consider besides cost, and it's ensuring that we have a system that in the end can protect all different road users from all walks of life, covering all different types of transport modes. So cost is important, but it should not be the only consideration when we're developing our strategy. And we move to the next slide. So once you go through that process, this is another example of what you may end up with that would help you prioritize. Once you decide on who you're moving, how you want to move them, and what that system looks like, you start to have a list of priority action items that you'll need to start delivering on and including in your strategy and action plan. And in the next slide, going back to the Swedish example, this is what some of the system requirements you would put in your strategy and action plan. So, in addition to your high level targets of, a 50% reduction in road fatalities, you also start setting indicators around, well, we also want to make sure 90% of the traffic on our roads stays within the speed limits. We want to make sure, at least 90% of all our drivers on the roads do not use drugs, do not use alcohol when they're driving. We want 100% of all our car users to be using their seatbelts. So once you go through this process, some of these action items would start falling out from the system requirements that you have set when you're looking at the design of the transport system. So if we move to the next slide, please. So we've talked a bit about setting targets and then making sure we also set what we want our road transport system to look like. The next step is then for us to understand, okay, we've got our target, we've got our system. Well, how close will what we have decided on actually take us to our target? And that's where we need to do some modeling and data analysis to understand the action plan and strategy that we put together. Is it actually going to get us to our target? And this slide is really just showing you that it's not a simple process. It does take a bit of time. It takes a bit of going back and forth between the government and the community and your different stakeholders. There needs to be discussions, there needs to be data analysis and a bit of back and forth before you end up with a draft strategy and a draft action plan. But the main idea behind this is to understand, are the actions that we've got in our strategy and action plans sufficient to help us meet the target that we set right from the outset? And we've moved to the next slide then. So the idea behind modeling work is to really help guide the development of the strategies and action plans, helping us understand how close the planned interventions that we have will get us to the targets that we've set. Now, there are different ways to do the modeling and analysis, and this is really dependent on the amount of data that you have in your country and how easy it is to access some of those data. So from a road safety analysis point of view, there are two main types of modeling and analysis. There's a huge number of different ways you can do this. I've just grouped them into more simplistic sort of ways. So you can do macro level data analysis. So this is statistical modeling. So the benefits of doing it this way is that you can analyze a huge amount of data at once, and you can, break things down into age, gender, the road safety issues. You can apply countermeasure effectiveness and crash reduction factors as a part of this analysis and get a projection on the number of lives that you can save. But by doing it at this macro level, it won't tell you exactly which life will be saved. So you won't know if it's a pedestrian, you won't know if it's a car occupant, and it also won't tell you where in the system these fatalities and injuries can be prevented. It's done on a statistical level, so we won't understand the micro details of what's happening. We just know on a mass level, if we do this, we can save X amount of lives. So in contrast to that, if you want to do a micro level data analysis, there is an example such as using a case-by-case modeling model. So this one is more data hungry. It is a more resource intensive process, and it will require a little bit more data from your side, including things such as detailed crash data, where and how the crash happened. But the benefit of doing it at this micro level where you analyze each fatality case by case is that it can give you a better understanding of where in the systems the lives and serious injuries are being saved and prevented. And also importantly, it will tell you which crashes are not prevented, which road user groups are not getting the same level of benefits and would need extra attention and innovation if we want to make a bigger difference. So if we move to the next slide, this is an example of a case-by-case analysis that was done in New Zealand. If we can just move to the next and the next one as well. Just back. Yep. So you can see using a case-by-case analysis here, we can understand that, if we implement everything that we've set out in our strategy and action plan, 87% of all fatalities can be prevented. And the red bit are the bits that we can't prevent. And case-by-case analysis will then be able to tell you exactly what you cannot prevent. So in this scenario, it was car occupants, motorcyclists, cyclists, and 9 pedestrians. And we can delve into even greater detail and understand, of those 9 pedestrians, is it in a pedestrian priority zone where they were being killed, or was it on a highway? How were they killed? So that's the benefit of doing it on a case-by-case basis, but it does take a lot more work. We can move to the next slide. And we might skip that one and move to the one after that. And what the case-by-case can also show you is, well, why are we not seeing the results as quickly as we would like? And we can break that down into, well, it's because we've been too slow with implementing things, or we understand, well, currently we don't have an intervention that can prevent that type of fatality, or the system's not operating as optimally as it should. So this is just an example of the level and types of different data analysis and models that you can use to help estimate the benefit of your strategies and action plans. And depending on the level of data availability you have in your country, you can do different versions of these types of analysis. And we sort of move to the next slide after that. And also, very helpfully, if you can, and you've got the data available in terms of, understanding, well, we need barriers on all high-speed roads above 80 kilometers an hour. If you have road asset data, you can also understand how much work you've got in front of you in order to close the gap between where you are currently and where you want to end up in 2030 and 2050. So a gap analysis is a good way to understand and quantify the amount of work that the strategy will need to cover in order to take us from where we are today to where we want to be, where our targets are set. So if we move to the next slide, and the aim of that gap analysis is really to turn where we are the starting, where most of our system is not safe system compliant, to where we want to be in the end, which is pretty much all our road network is safe system compliant and it meets all the system requirements that we have set up front. So that would be the ideal bit. So if we move to the poll results from our last poll question around what is the target of your country's road safety strategy, if you can bring up the poll results from the last poll question, please, Mark. It'll be interesting to understand how many of your country's road safety strategy and what they're sort of aiming for. So it looks like we've got a bit of a split, and encouragingly, about half of all your strategies are aiming for both a reduction in road fatalities and serious injuries, and about, once again, just under a quarter that's aiming for just a reduction in road fatalities, and just under a quarter under a third as well that has no target or no strategy. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on that. If we move to the next slide, I'm not that surprised that, about half don't actually have a target for serious injury. If we actually look at what's happening globally, there is actually no global definition of what a serious injury is, which has made it very difficult for a lot of countries to aim for a target for serious injury. It's also made it difficult for countries to be able to track and measure progress in terms of serious injury. And that is something that we have to consider as a global community on how to resolve that. So going back to the global status report, we actually find that, about a third of the countries don't actually report on serious injuries, which is roughly what we're seeing in our poll results as well. And of the countries that do report on serious injury, there are different ways of measuring it, which makes it difficult for us to be able to compare the serious injury targets between different countries. And there are varying levels of definition, as you can see on that chart. But at the very least, if it's something that as a global community we need to think about, it would be, a bit of a missed opportunity if countries don't also consider setting a target for serious injury, because we know that for every single fatality, there are many hundreds more of the injuries actually occurring. So they do make up a huge proportion of hospitalization cost and obviously road trauma cost as well. So it's something that we need to consider as we move forward in our global road safety efforts. So we move to the next slide then. So we've designed our system, we've got our targets. Now we need to understand, how do we prioritize some of these actions? When do we start investing? When do we want to start implementing? And this is where you start developing your strategic response. So from our data modeling and analysis, we can understand how many lives can be saved if we were to actually implement everything in our strategy and action plan. But depending, say like if we're actually setting a target for 2050, we can save under scenario 1, which is the yellow line, you can see we can save, 411 lives as an example. This is for a small state in Australia, 411 lives in the lead up to 2030. But when you save those lives would actually make a big difference. So you can see in scenario 2 and scenario 3, which are the blue and the green lines, if you're willing to put the investment in upfront in the first 5 to 10 years, you can actually save many more lives under that line, which means more people will benefit and there'll be less injuries and less fatalities in the lead up to 2050. So by using these strategic response models and data analysis, you can start playing around and discussing with your stakeholders, well, this is what's going to happen if we delay our investment from the first 5 years to, 15 years later. X number of lives will be lost. We won't be able to prevent X number of injuries. But if we were to actually accelerate our actions and front load a lot of our investment, we can save X number of lives more than if we were to do scenario 1. So this is just an example of how you can use modeling to help you decide when in the next 30-year period you want to start investing and when you want to start your actions. Of course, the later you start with your actions, it means that in the interim, more people will be killed, more people will be injured. And that needs to be balanced against whether or not you actually have the funding to be able to do the work. So this is a very useful process to help you understand and help you decide in your strategy and action plan when you want to start with your actions and what sort of consequences and benefits it could bring about. And then if we move to the last section of the presentation is, we've set our targets, but everything is really about how do we communicate with our stakeholders. And I don't have a lot of time in this series to go through the communication with the community and the politicians, but I just wanted to highlight that as a part of the strategy and action plan development process, there's usually an element of consultation with the community. The system that we're trying to design is for the community, so they should be heard and understood. So this is some research that we did in Australia quite a few years ago now, just to understand what people's perception of road safety was in Victoria, Australia. And what we found was that people didn't feel like they have a lot of say in what the road system should look like. They feel like a lot of the road safety rules that we have designed have just been imposed on them. So they don't feel like they actually have a part to play and they don't have any ownership of the road system or of any of the rules. And then we move to the next slide. And this is an important one, if we just bring up all of them, is that if we want to make changes that are a little bit more politically sensitive, such as with speed limit reductions, you can see some of the answers here is around, well, how do you feel about speed limit reductions? And the comments that we got back from the community was that, well, we don't know what you're trying to do. We don't understand why you want to reduce the speed limit. I didn't know that people would get killed if we travel at more than 30 kilometers an hour. And if you tell me why, then I'm more willing to comply and I'll be more willing to accept a lot of these changes. We can bring up the next one as well, Mark. So this is just an example of why it's important to communicate with the community, because they also have an influence on whether your government and politicians are willing to introduce some of the more sensitive changes, such as around speed limit changes. So if you have the support of the community, maybe some of these changes will be more easily implemented. So community consultation plays a big part during your strategy development process, but I must stress, you have to ask the right questions. The questions you ask should not be about, do you want this or do you want that, or do you think this is a better idea or that is a better idea? We have to understand that the community are not road safety experts. They don't have the road safety expertise to understand whether or not this is a good intervention for an intersection or pedestrian priority area. What we want to do with these community consultations is give them an opportunity to speak to us and to understand what we're trying to make changes for, so they feel like they are a part of the journey. But it's not for them to decide from a technical perspective what should be done. It's an opportunity for us to also engage and educate them around why these changes are needed. But in terms of what needs to be done, that should be decided on a technical and evidence-based level, and not what people think is a good idea. So that's something to keep in mind. So just wrapping up now on the last, if we bring up the last slide, please, Mark, is obviously a lot of the things that I talked about today can be quite data hungry. You will need some level of data in order to be able to plan your strategy and your action plan. But even if you don't have access to a significant or a very detailed amount of data, you can use what you have. Just using very basic data, you can develop a strategy and action plan for your country and your jurisdiction. The very least that you would need is an understanding of how many fatalities, serious injuries are happening. And even better is if you can break it down into the types of trauma issues, so that you've got an understanding of what are the problems, who's being killed, so you can be a little bit more targeted in your approach. But do not let a lack of data hold you back. With just very basic data, you'll be able to at least embark on some of these strategy development processes. What we talked about in terms of what's effective and what's not, a lot of those data are already available. You don't need to replicate them. They're readily accessible through a lot of resources that was touched on in webinars 1 and 2. And we can go a long way in reducing road trauma just by changing what we're doing now and understanding is not safe system best practice, and changing it to what we know is best practice. Just by doing that, we can actually go a long way in improving road safety in our countries. So that's the end of my presentation. But just before I leave you and move on to our next speaker, just sort of one last question for you, and you don't have to answer it now. So I want to understand, what are some of the biggest challenges for you to develop an evidence-based road safety strategy in your country? What is the biggest challenge? And feel free to pop your answer into the question and answer box, and I will pick up on that and we can have a chat about it during the question and answer session. So thank you very much for your time, and we will move on to our next speaker now. So Aravat, I would like to welcome you back and have you share with us your presentation and give us a bit of an understanding of the strategy development process in Armenia. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Jessica, for presentation. It's very good and important regulations how to draft road safety strategy. I think you will share a file with all of us. Thank you again. Hello, dear colleagues. I'm Arifat Bogosian from the Ministry of Internal, from the Territorial Administration and Infrastructure Ministry. I'm head of the Road Policy Division. It's encouraging to see such a diverse audience from the ISA Pacific Road Safety Observatory focus and experts engaged in this webinar about road safety. It underscores the continues the commitment of different governments to prioritize this crucial issue. I'm happy to provide an overview of the current state of road safety in my country, outline the government efforts, and highlight the challenges we face. Next slide, please.
Next slide, please, Mark.
And next. One more.
So, sorry, sounds like we're having a bit of technical difficulty. Apologies, everyone. Just 1 second while we sort out this. Aravat, have you selected the English channel?
Yes.
Okay. Mark, can you hear now? Maybe I can. Next slide, please, Mark.
Okay, thank you, Mark. More than 300 lives are lost on Armenian roads every year, a significantly higher per capita rate than in neighboring countries. Between 2010 and 2024, we witnessed struggling over 5,316 road accidents, resulting in countless injuries and fatalities. These numbers are not just statistics. They represent human lives cut short, families scattered, and the communities devastated. We can't afford to remain indifferent to this crisis. Traffic accident indicators show that the majority of fatal accidents, about 67%, occurs in the city streets. And the majority of fatal accidents accounting for about 40% of total accidents occurred in the interstate roads, which is due to the high speed of traffic on these roads. The number of road accidents has shown an overall increasing trend of the years. Between 2010 and 2024, road accidents increased by 143.7% in Armenia. We have some improvement in 2024. The number of road accidents decreased somewhat by almost 300 or 6.5%. The number of fatalities by 45 and injuries by 421, which are the results of measures implemented by the police patrol service. Between 2014 and 2025, the number of vehicles in Armenia increased by 9%, which indicates that Armenia should make every effort to implement appropriate measures to reduce the number of deaths and injuries by building new bypasses, strengthening traffic control, etc. The analysis of the Ministry of Internal Affairs shows that the cause of most road accidents was the result of violations by drivers. Next slide, please. The National Road Safety Strategy was drafted with the support of ADB and its expert, but taking into account that the strategy document was developed back in 2021, it was necessary to review data and figures presented in the document, as well as take inventory of the measures, and we draw up a new draft strategy and 5-year action plan following the 5 pillars and 12 target of the United Nations Road Safety Global Plan. The document was discussed with the government stakeholders, but since the government has adopted the policy to having a comprehensive transport strategy, therefore the National Road Safety Strategy will become part of the comprehensive strategy. At the request of Armenian government, last year, Tetra Tech, with the support of USAID, was working on the development of new transport strategy, which was mainly to be based on the unblocking the transport routes with neighboring countries within the framework of Crossroad of Peace. How, for reasons now to all of you, the USA new government has frozen all USAID projects in Armenia, including the transport strategy program. And currently we are negotiating with the World Bank to support the financing of this program. The strategy will be implemented in 2 phases. The output for phase 2, increasing and modernizing the role of the road safety through 2025-2040, and the target of phase 1 is to reduce fatalities by 50%, have down the crashes, reduce the injuries and their consequences. And output for phase 2 is to have a comprehensive and coordinated road safety management. And the target for phase 2 is reduce fatalities by 10%. Although the strategy is not binding in Armenia, it's not yet adopted by the government, but we are implementing several actions and measures of strategy, which will be talked about in the next slides. This is the scheme of the road safety management system. By the decision of Prime Minister of Armenia, the interdepartmental committee was established to coordinate the work on improving the level of road safety in Armenia in 2022, chaired by Deputy Prime Minister Tigran Khachaturian. The committee members include all interested ministries and organizations concerned with road safety, and the University of Architecture and Construction, and as well Paul Shahinian, the director of National Road Safety Council. I have added a road lighting agency to the diagram with dot lines. But Armenia does not have road safety leading agency. But taking into account the rapidly growing number of road accidents, the government already understands the importance of having a separate agency. And tomorrow, parliamentary discussions are planned in the National Assembly with the participation of the commission members and members of parliament to discuss road safety issues. And I hope that after this meeting, the issue of establishing a road safety agency will be resolved positively, because some of PMs believe that the need of create an agency has matured. Next slide, please. Mark, thank you. Funded by the United Nations Road Safety Fund and supported by the UNDP, a new data management system with analytical tools was developed in Armenia through the SDG Innovation Lab in 2021-2024. The road accident analysis tools includes identification of accident-prone sections on the roads, analysis and road user behavior, statistical analysis and reporting. And currently, all traffic crashes analysis by the Ministry of Territorial Administration, Infrastructure and Road Department are conducted through this system. However, the system needed some modernization, as the system records traffic accidents not by road kilometers or pickets, but by geographic coordinates, which is inconvenient and time consuming when performing analysis. And now our ministry and IT staff of Ministry of Internal Affairs are discussing a solution to this issue. Next, please. And as part of the project of piloting of the system was carried out as a result of which black spot projects were implemented in 2 sections of M1 highway nearby APRSO village. Next, please. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. This is the scheme of a comprehensive national road crash data registration system. It's the perspective project. Just now, information databases of vehicles and drivers are managed by the police and are synchronized with the crash data electronic system, but the police and hospital road crash data system are not linked to each other. However, the road crash data collection by the police are not complete. Therefore, Armenia plans to create a comprehensive national road data registration system, which will consolidate traffic accidents data from all systems, including accident data from the road police, health organizations, the vehicle technical inspection system, as well as the road camera data, perhaps the crash data of insurance companies, which will allow us to compare all road crash data from all systems and carry out factual analysis and conduct operational actions. In this case, Armenia is planning to have a national observatory as well. At the same time, I'd like to note the Eastern Partnership Road Safety Observatory funded by the European Union and supported by the World Bank has been established to support the 5 Eastern Partnership countries, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Moldova, and Ukraine. And last year, we signed a memorandum of understanding, and the observatory plans to create a mini CADA system, which will consolidate traffic accident data from the 5 EAP countries and enable the observatory to conduct analysis and help countries solve existing road safety problems. Next, please. In the framework of SEPA agreement, now go back, please. Okay, in the framework of the SEPA agreement, we should implement 2 road infrastructure safety directives concerned with transports, trans-European road tunnel safety requirements and the infrastructure safety management. And to implement these directives, the amendment did in the law on motorways in 2024. The regulations proposed by the law amendments are aimed at increasing the safety level of the road network and the road tunnels, reducing their potential risks and implementing a prevention policy in the direction of traffic accidents. In the amendment of the law, we included provisions on road safety management, mandatory requirements to reduce the road safety audit requirements to conduct a road safety impact assessment, to inventory and eliminate black spots, and some provisions requires about the safety requirements for road tunnels. Within the framework of both, we are currently reviewing the charts of the ministry and the chart of the my department, as well as all job descriptions of civil servants will be reviewed. We develop as well the manual on road safety audit and the road safety auditor qualification and training regulations, And in the few days later, we are going to send it to Ministry of Justice for legal expertise. Next slide, please. In 2022-2024, 47 black spots on 6 interstate and 4 national highways were improved. Besides, in 2024, as part of road renovation and reconstruction works, approximately 9,433 road signs and more than 121,000 line meter metal barriers are installed. In this year, we are going to implement 10 black spot program sorted by state budget. It's currently in the procurement phase to begin the design process. And in 2026-2028, we will implement a totally 60 black spot programs sourced by state budget. Besides, I should mention that in this year we are going to conduct audit qualification program, and starting from the 2026 in the first, the interstate roads will be a pass audit, and then from the 2027 all national and interstate projects will conduct audit, and starting with since 2028 all state road infrastructure projects will undergo to road safety audit. Besides, a note-wide road safety impact assessment will be carried out in order to assess the adequacy of state road safety indicators by 2029. Next slide, please. We made some, we drafted some regulations, and the government adopted concerned with the establishment of use of electronic scooters, which stipulate that the use of electronic scooters is permitted to persons over 18-year-old, and as well as persons who are 16-year-old and have a right to drive vehicles of the AM subcategory. Regulations have been adopted by the government on the professional qualification and periodic professional training of drivers holding driving license of category C, D, CE, DE, C1 E, and D1E. We have a package legislation project regulations concerned with technical inspection of vehicles, which among other regulations also defined the qualification requirements for specialists at technical inspection stations, the requirements that the vehicle must first pass a technical inspection before signing a contract with the insurance companies, and mandatory requirements to use speed limits in vehicles of category N3 and N3. Next slide, please.
Aravat, just a couple more minutes for the presentation. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, it's okay now. Thank you. We did some awareness campaigns and educational program in the last few years. And the national campaign Safety is in Your Action was implemented using international East training materials with the support of European Investment Bank, and over the 155,000 163 school children participate in this campaign, including 87,443 school children aged 6 to 10 and 720 school children aged 11-14. One other educational program was did by supporting with the World Bank, Safe Village, within the framework of which 16,397 overall number of school children is targeted schools in 83 rural settlements out of 65 communities included in this program. With collaboration of UNDP, USAID, Police and the Ministry of Education, developed the pilot road safety and injury prevention educational program for young children under 6 years age, and parents engaged over 500 children and 800 parents. Besides, police with the Ministry of Education every year conducts road traffic safety classes in all schools in Armenia. Besides, we are planning to conduct a road safety national awareness campaign, which will be oriented on raising awareness among targeted groups about diverse topics regarding road safety importance. Next slide, please.
Sorry, Aravat, we're going to have to wrap up in the next minute so we can move to question and answer. So maybe the next slide's the last one. That's okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Since 2020, the Republic of Armenia has been implementing a penalty system as an additional type of penalty for traffic violations. Thanks to this system as an additional type of penalty for traffic violations. Thanks to this introduction of this system, the driver's license of persons who commit a large number of violations is suspended, and such behavior, if such behavior continues, these drivers are deprived of the driver's license. Currently, the penalty points are 9, but from May this year, the point will be increased to 14, but the amount of the sanctions will also increase somewhat. Since the middle of 2021, the road police transformed it into patrol police, which was initially introduced in the capital of city, Yerevan, then gradually in all regions of Armenia in 2023. One of the main functions of patrol service is also to regulate the road traffic safety. In 2024, the patrol service detected about 940,000 violations of traffic rules, which is 261,000 or more than 40% more than in 2023. This is the result of trainings of the road traffic safety organized for patrols. But in my opinion, such training should be continuous, and the patrol officers have not yet, because the patrol service have not yet fully adapted and not realized the importance of their actions in terms of road safety. Next slide, please.
Sorry, Aravat, I think we're out of time, unfortunately. If it's okay with you, we might just have to end it there, so we can finish.
Okay.
I'm very sorry about that. Yes, please.
Okay. I want to just add that we are going to do a road safety program with a global road safety fund with support of the World Bank. It will launch next week, and the grant will fund for reviewing of Armenia's road safety management and conducting road safety risk assessment of strengthening high risk of corridors, including TNT and Asian highway network roads. Besides, with support of Asia Development Bank, we will conduct IRAP project, and we're happy for this because almost 1 year we waited for this project. And and we have also a program with the European Union, and we hope it will give us a twinning project for the implementation of the requirements of a road infrastructure strategy. It will be 1 or 2 year program, and will allow the ministry to implement all road safety requirements stipulated by law and by directives. Okay, I'm finalizing, and of course I should say that several road safety measures have been implemented in Armenia over the past few years, but of course it's not complete and not enough, and can't be considered as sufficient to increase the level of road safety. And only by the support of international organizations and donors, Armenia can achieve the United Nations Road Safety Global Plan targets. Thank you all for your patience and attention.
Thank you very much for that very detailed presentation, Areva. We really appreciate you taking the time to share with us the strategy development process and the plan that you have for Armenia. It's very impressive, and we wish you and the country all the best in implementing it. Thank you, everyone. We are unfortunately running out of time for question and answers for this session, but thank you to everyone that has contributed to the conversation. I can see there are lots of questions coming through the Q&A session, and also talking about what you see as the main barrier to your country being able to develop a road safety plan. I can see lack of data being a very frequently mentioned issue, and of course it is one of the key things that we will need if we do want to develop a strategy. And then funding has also come up as another key area of focus. And I think there's been also some commentary around, well, how do we actually get the data, and how do we actually develop the data systems in order to be able to collect that information? And that is another webinar in itself, because there are lots of different ways to help countries develop and track and collect better data information, but it would require a bit of work, and potentially that can be the topic of another webinar session that we run. There is one comment that I saw that was talking about the community consultation that I do want to address. I think perhaps I didn't have enough time to sort of address community consultation as a whole, but I absolutely agree that true community consultation is about hearing what the community sees as road safety issues in their community. And I think that is a great way to approach that consultation. I guess what I was alluding to is we should not implement certain road safety measures just because the community thinks it's a bad idea, because they don't have all the information that we do. But maybe that also needs to be the topic of another more detailed conversation that we need to have. So before we end for the day, Mark, can you please bring up the last poll question? If you can just let us know what you found useful from today's conversation, that will be helpful for us moving forward and understanding what other future webinar series should focus on. So with that, if we move to the next and final slide of the presentation, Mark, I also saw a lot of comments around how do we access the great presentation from Aravat and all the materials from this session. There is a link on the APRSO website that Mark will bring up in just a second, where you'll be able to download all the presentations from this webinar and also past and future webinar sessions that we've held. And of course, in a couple of weeks' time, as a follow-up to today's webinar session, we will be holding another one. We've talked about strategy development today. The next one will be focusing on how do we track our performance in relation to the strategy as we deliver on our road safety work. So please do join us in 2 weeks' time at the same time, and you'll be able to hear more from our experts on how to develop key performance and key safety indicators to track your progress in delivering on road safety for your country. And with that, once again, Aravat, I want to say a very big thank you for you to take the time preparing your presentation and sharing your thoughts with us. We really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone that has joined the call today. I hope you find the webinar and the information that has been provided today very useful. And we hope to see you again in 2 weeks' time. Enjoy your day or evening, and we will be in touch very soon. Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.